Hey, implicit connotations. Well, I'm Elise from the crowdfunded translation project, and wanted to just tell you a little bit about what that project is and give you some updates about what I've been doing with your support. The Inessa Armand project. After finishing Kalantai's social basis of the female question, I put out a call for suggestions for the next project. One of those suggestions that I received was to translate the essays and letters of Inessa Armand, Kalantai's predecessor at the Bolshevik women's section. Suppressed by Stalin and never translated into English, Armand's writings enrich our understanding of the Bolshevik women's movement in the run-up to the October Revolution and the early days of revolutionary Russia. With your support, I have been able to translate all of her extant essays and am currently raising the last $1,950 to cover the cost of translating the remainder of her extant works, which at this point is just her correspondence. If you would like to support the project, all contributions are beautiful. You'll find links in the description. The Punto Final project is a project that is really just at its inception. Punto Final, for those unfamiliar with it, i.e. likely most of the people watching this right now, was a magazine edited by Manuel Caviese Donoso that ran from 1965 to the eve of the 1973 CIA-backed coup in Chile, and then from 1989 to 2018, publishing a grand total of 894 issues. In addition to being a platform for theoretical and ideological debate, they were also a source of excellent political journalism. Their real-time analysis of political developments in Chile, the rise of the Unidad Popular, the looming coup, and the limits of electoralism has aged extremely well, and is well worth reading for anyone interested in the period. The Chilean left is sort of in a media bubble, and the Anglosphere left really doesn't do a great job of breaking that bubble and really building connections there. So the discussion that you hear in English about Chile, even in supposed left outlets, such as Jacobin, often has little or nothing to do with the state of discussion amongst comrades in Chile. So this is part of my attempts to contribute to sort of breaking down that bubble and fostering some understanding of the thought amongst revolutionaries in Chile, both historically and currently. I have so far translated 7 articles, including a long read on electoralism versus armed struggle called Chile, the Ballad or the Bullet by Punto Final editor Manuel Caviese, and currently am working on various pieces of political analysis from the eve of the electoral campaign that would bring Salvador Allende to power, or at least to government. These include discussions of electoral versus revolutionary strategy and how and to what extent these things can coexist, discussions of US imperialist interference in Chilean politics, One of the challenges of this project, since its inception, has been getting the word out.
But welcome everybody. Be sure to hit the like button. Be sure to hit the subscribe button.
I remember in middle school when you felt self-conscious if you were the last one to go through puberty. That really went topsy-turvy, didn't it?
sometimes the Hasbara, it's too much explaining yourself and it's too apologetic.
Be sure to hit the notifications bell.
I actually do believe Israel won't just bomb countless civilians.
Be sure to tweet this out. Be sure to put this up on your Facebook.
You have to be kind to people. Being kind is the guys in this mess in the first place.
Put this up on your Reddit.
Chile is a country.
Be sure to cut and paste, cut and paste a link to this to go into your favorite Facebook chat group.
It's good to see so many normal people in here.
Now, spanking isn't just my deep, dark personal secret. It's America's deep, dark secret.
I've never seen it explained so simply anywhere.
Put this on WhatsApp. Put this on Telegram. Put this on your favorite messenger app.
Hello and welcome to the Untitled Anarchist Seagull channel. I'm your host, an Untitled Anarchist Seagull called Elise, and at the moment I'm just mostly relieved that my camera is apparently working because it fell on a very hard floor. But so far so good. I was worried I was going to have to be sort of a VTuber, but not visible, so an in-VTuber. But it seems to be okay, and with any luck, it will continue to seem to be okay. Let's see what we've got. We've got all sorts of assholes. Apparently, a lot of people are talking about how there is now communism in New York. We won, chat. We won. The communism is already here in New York, so it's just going to be a matter of time, apparently. According to Matt Walsh and Ben Shapiro and Tim Pool and all sorts of other sources who absolutely are totally reliable. Okay. So I thought we might start out with a some liberal slop from David Pacman. I'm particularly interested to see if any mention at all is going to be made of the fucking atrocity in the Prairieland case, where his several comrades were sentenced to decades in prison for going to a noise demo, and in one case for saving a bunch of people's lives. So, that seems like the sort of thing that if you're supposed to be like the opposition, the resistance, the bulwark against fascism, you might talk about. He does not have any video titles mentioning it, but his video titles are the most clickbaity slop crap ever anyway. But I've got the long form of his stream, and they are, at the very least, chapterized. So we're just going to have a look and see what he decided this week was about.
There's a stunning new international survey which finds that confidence in Donald Trump has collapsed to just 23%, and the reputation...
Wait, internationally? I'm surprised it was that high to begin with.
United States is crashing as well. 4 years after Roe v. Wade was overturned, Donald Trump is not apologizing. They're actually still bragging about it. And
well, wait, he's not apologizing, but why would he apologize? Was this something he said he would apologize for? I mean, yes, it's true. A little over a decade ago, he was still officially claiming to be pro-choice and everything. But since then, there hasn't been much sign of that. So why would he apologize?
Who made it happen and why it matters, and maybe how...
For leaving aside who we're talking about, he doesn't fucking apologize for things. But usually you apologize for something if you feel you did it wrong.
Can prevent it from happening again. Now, meanwhile, the Reflecting Pools saga is getting...
Oh, okay, great. I'm glad we're focusing on what's important.
Even more absurd, they've put up fences around the algae-infested pool after Trump's weird claims about knife-wielding vandals making a slit. And there are questions swirling around Mitch McConnell.
Okay.
He is in the hospital. We don't know what hospital, and we don't know why. And there are now people saying...
Well, I mean, I would assume it would be a hospital for turtles.
Is he even really alive? And then there's this...
Has he ever been, though?
Bizarre report suggesting that Donald Trump may be receiving an experimental drug that has only been approved for one person in the United States, a 79-year-old man, in April.
Okay, I mean, that wouldn't be the first time. When he got COVID the first time, in the early years of the pandemic, he also got completely pumped up with all sorts of experimental shit. I mean, especially, I remember, monoclonal antibodies and a bunch of other things. Basically, all the stuff nobody else could get.
Which is when Donald Trump was 79 years old. There's a lot more detail to it. We're going to get to all of it today.
Okay, so are you going to get to the fact that a bunch of people were sentenced to decades in prison for being at a noise demo, or in one case, for knowing people who went to a noise demo and being in possession of political literature? I mean, that seems like something that it would be worthy of a headline. I mean, okay, it sounds like no. It sounds like we're not going to be hearing about that. Because we got important reflecting pool news. I'm so glad that we have people like this to help separate the wheat from the chaff. Separate the stems from the seeds, from the delicious buds of information. So, okay.
In fact, in Canada, 4 years ago under Biden, 83% of Canadians said, hey, we see the United States as a reliable partner.
I mean, that's wild. They shouldn't have. Like,
83% under Biden. Today, only 35%.
I'm curious whether that figure was before or after October 2023, when Biden started committing genocide.
Of Canadians trust the United States. It is not lost on me that when Trump was president, he insisted that the country was respected under him during...
Well, I mean, and what the lie there is that it was respected at all. But the thing about this, when we're talking about, of course, we're using, when you have these sorts of conversations, when you talk about these sorts of surveys, it's always Western Europe and Canada and Australia, you know, countries, the colonial countries, the imperial core, countries full of white people, basically. You never actually look at what people in, say, Latin America say, or, I don't know, the Arab-Iranian region think of the United States. Because if you did that, you would find that the people who have the most experience being on the business end of U.S. foreign policy, they've never liked the United States all that much.
His first term. And then when Biden became
And that's most of the world.
Trump insisted that the United States is no longer respected because Biden is president. But if we re-elect Trump, which the country did, the U.S. would go back to being respected globally under Donald Trump. But
yeah, and of course the big lie there is, again, the idea that this would be going back to being respected.
Donald Trump says the opposite is true. Respect for the United States around the world has completely collapsed since Donald Trump came back to power. Now, think back.
Okay. I'm curious whether there were surveys on public opinion of the United States, say in 2024. You know, during the genocide. Okay, so this is June 11th, 2025. That's U.S. opinion of foreign policy issues. Views of the U.S. around the world. Okay, what year is this? This is June 11th, 2024. Okay. Gonna pop this up on the screen. Is we can just have a look, because this, okay, June 11, 2024, so the genocide was well in full swing, except only necessary cookies. International views of the U.S. are largely favorable. Oh, let's see what countries they're including. Well, let's see. Okay, Turkey, they didn't include many countries in the Arab-Iranian region. Turkey is 80% unfavorable. Tunisia, 87% unfavorable. Then we've got, let me see, in Southeast Asia. Okay, let's see. Singapore, 50% unfavorable to 40% favorable. Australia, that actually surprises me. Australia is 60% unfavorable. Again, usually the European colonial countries do tend to be the ones that have the most favorable opinion. And they are, of course, overrepresented here. But, okay, so... Okay, India, overwhelmingly favorable, only 15% unfavorable. Okay, now let's go. Okay, Europe. So... France, 48% unfavorable to 46% favorable. 44 to 47% in Sweden, so tied. Greece, 50% unfavorable to 48% favorable, so kind of a wash, but slight edge to unfavorable. Like, okay. In all of Europe, actually, in 2024, it was kind of half and half. I mean, 42 to 56 in Italy, 42% unfavorable. Actually, I mean, pretty high unfavorables, even though they are exceeded in a lot of cases by the favorables, or it's within the margin for error. Okay, positive views of the U.S. have declined in some countries since 2023. Let's see. This is 2024. Let's just make sure you can actually see this. Yeah, here we go. So, Australia in 2023, 52% favorable. 40% favorable in 2024. Israel, of all places, 87% to 77% favorable. I mean, you send record-breaking aid to commit genocide and they still do. Like, what the fuck would you have to do at that point? South Africa, 59% favorable in 2023, 49% in 2024. Netherlands also a 10% drop, 58 to 48. Germany, 57 to 49. Greece, 56 to 48. Okay. So, in all of these, this is not all of the countries where where the view is, where unfavorable had the edge in 2024. Okay. The share of... Okay, in Chile, Colombia, Ghana, and Peru, the share with a positive view of the U.S. has increased since we last asked this question in 2017, which is a bit of a... that is a bit of a leap. It's much more interesting in this particular context to see what committing a live stream genocide did to popular opinion. Let's see. Okay. Here, listen. Canada is a good example of the ideological divide. A majority of adults who place themselves on the right, 66% have a favorable opinion of the U.S., compared with only 37% of those on the left. This is 2024, remember. The age gap in positive views of the U.S. is seen in Canada, Hungary, India, Singapore, South Africa, South Korea, Sri Lanka, Thailand, Turkey, and the Latin American countries surveyed. In Turkey, as an example, 29% of adults under 35 rate the U.S. favorable, compared with only 7% of those aged 50 and older, and that surprises, that really surprises me. I would have thought it would be the other way around. And in Australia, Israel, and Sweden, the age pattern is reversed. For example, 85% of older Israelis and 72% of younger Israelis have a positive assessment of the U.S. So, I mean, that isn't exact. Those aren't exactly rosy numbers, even in the countries where you generally expect the U.S. to be well thought of. It was actually fairly even.
Back to the Iraq War under George W. Bush in 2003. There were a lot of people around the world who didn't like us then. We are less popular now than when George W. Bush was carrying out his ill-advised war based on faulty intelligence in Iraq.
Faulty intelligence. Shut the fuck up. It was not faulty intelligence. In fact, the public statement from the intelligence community at the very beginning of the push for war was that they didn't think he had weapons of mass destruction, but if he did have them, he'd only use them to defend himself against a catastrophic attack, i.e. in self-defense. So, yeah, not faulty intelligence, they deliberately fabricated bullshit.
2003. Germans are more negative in their opinion about the United States today under Trump than they were during the height of the ill-advised Iraq War.
It's worth noting that Germany, again, Germany's opinion of the U.S. was already declining. This is why it's useful to actually look at these things in more than just a fucking vacuum. Because Germany's opinion of the U.S. was already declining significantly between 2023 and 2024. And, 40%, we're talking about in the countries that are the U.S.'s base of popular support internationally. We're talking overwhelmingly, half and half when it comes, practically a 50-50 split. That's not great to begin with, and that was already last year.
About that. The countries that most dislike and distrust Trump are pretty diverse. This is another interesting angle. Turkey, a Muslim country,
which already had an overwhelmingly unfavorable opinion of the U.S.
Sweden, a Scandinavian social democracy.
And I believe they were on that list too. Let me see here. So Sweden, yeah. Sweden in 2023, 55% favorable. 2024, 47% favorable. It was already dropping, and it was already below 50% in the first place. So, yeah, this version of history is a little bit selective.
Mexico, a Latin American Catholic country. These are some of the countries that least trust Trump, and they are very different among themselves. Now, I already know, if there's any MAGAs watching, I already know how MAGAs react to this sort of news. They go, who cares? Who cares about, the opinions of other countries? We're the United States. We're right about everything. These other countries are wrong about everything. These sissy Italians with their espresso.
Yeah, well, I mean...
French people with their steak frites don't like Trump. Or,
Why not? It's interesting. Well, he assumes probably correctly that there aren't a whole lot of international viewers. Because, again, the U.S. is not actually very favorably viewed generally.
David, your fellow Argentinians with your delicious milanesa and empanadas and your cool coffee shops, you guys in Argentina don't like Trump. We don't care, screw you. And it's very funny, but I would say to them, hold on a second. You should care.
Well, nobody... So why should they care now, though? See, it's one thing to say you should care overall. That you should care overall whether the rest of the world, especially the countries that really bear the brunt of what is euphemistically called U.S. foreign policy, what they think of the U.S. It's another thing to only care about these things when it's either favorable under a president you support or unfavorable under one you oppose. Like, that's... In this case, it was unfavorable already, and when you get beyond this sort of imperial bubble, in a lot of places it's really unfavorable, and has been for a very long time, to the extent that a lot of those countries don't even get surveyed anymore.
About global opinion of the United States, if you care about American jobs. When foreign consumers and investors and tourists and businesses lose confidence and trust in the United States, they don't travel to the United States as much. They buy less from the United States. They invest less here, and they look for alternatives in other parts of the world. What about national security? When allies trust the United States and the president, They
Like, who gives a fuck about national security, really? It's not our security. Okay.
Today is the 4-year anniversary of when the Supreme Court
okay, we're moving on, yes. So, yeah. Not a word about Prairie Land. Not a single fucking word. This is one of the people who likes to present himself as like the progressive opposition media. So, where can we, let's see where we're going to go next. Oh, Ben Shapiro is having another normal one. He asked, why did we think Iran would keep their word? Well, I mean, they did. The short version is they did. The U.S. did not keep their word. But why would we think that Ben Shapiro would be honest about this?
You can tell a deal is going well when it's in tenuous shape within 2 days. President Trump signed an MOU, a vague MOU with Iran on Wednesday. That same day.
It wasn't, I mean, it wasn't that vague. But it's convenient to talk about it as if it's vague if you don't want to acknowledge what was agreed to.
An Iranian-backed terror group attacked Israel and Israeli citizens and Israeli soldiers many, many times. Same thing on Thursday. And then on Thursday...
Oh, okay. Where were those Israeli soldiers, by the way? What were they doing at the time? Were they just, you know, in Jaffa having a cappuccino or something? But minding their own business, were they? Or were they actually breaching the ceasefire by murdering people in Lebanon at the time, actually?
The Iranians reportedly pulled out of negotiations in Switzerland on the next step.
Oh, well, yes, because Israel attacked Iran, because Israel attacked Lebanon. And part of the deal was that Israel didn't do that, and they were going to withdraw completely from Lebanon. And the U.S. said that they were going to do that, and the U.S. did not.
All of which was predictable, because Iran is run by lying terrorist thugs.
Okay. The reason Iran decided to enforce the wording of the agreement that they came up with, that is on their terms, is that they're the ones lying? What about the people who are actually breaching the agreement?
We'll get into all the latest in the non-deal Iran deal. This is The Ben Shapiro Show.
You see, he's very important, you can tell, because he uses strings. Strings tell you somebody is important. That's what they're there for. In this cinematic universe.
Alrighty, so here's the latest. On Wednesday, as you recall, the President of the United States was in Versailles, signing a memorandum of understanding with the Islamic Republic of Iran, a terror state.
As opposed to the United States, which would never hurt anybody. See, when the U.S. bombs a fucking primary school, it's not a terror state. But when Iran doesn't attack anybody, and only actually counterattacks after massively provoked by things including the quadruple tap bombing of a primary school, that makes Iran a terror state. In fact, Iran was a terror state before that, despite the fact that Iran had not actually attacked anyone in literal centuries.
That same exact day, Iran backed Lebanese terror group Hezbollah, which is responsible, by the way, for the murder of literally hundreds of American citizens.
No, they're not. He's talking about the U.S. Marine barracks that was occupying Lebanon in 1982. And the U.S. Marines the day before had car-bombed a mosque during, I believe it was morning prayer, killed hundreds of people, and so as retaliation for it, the Lebanese resistance responded in kind at the U.S. Marines. See, if you occupy other people's countries, you do have to take into account that they might defend themselves. That's how that works, actually, Ben. I think you'll find.
63 rockets at Israeli troops, plus 2 explosive drones. Plus
where were the troops? What were the troops doing at the time, Ben?
Missile. On Thursday, the next day, 5 terrorists from Hezbollah approached the Israeli forward defense line in Lebanon.
Wait, it was in Lebanon, you say? Their defense line in Lebanon, their forward defense line I don't think it's called defense when you're in somebody else's country, actually, Ben. See, when you're in somebody else's country, that's called you're trying to occupy their country. You invaded their country. People are allowed to actually fight back when you do that. And part of the deal was that Israel had to leave Lebanon. So they were still in Lebanon, you say. That seems significant, actually. Maybe you should spend some more time on that.
Also, Hezbollah launched 5 explosive drones. That same day, 4 Israeli troops were incinerated by one of those explosive drones.
Okay, and again, where were the troops? He just said they were in Lebanon. So it sounds like actually it wasn't Iran that violated the deal. It wasn't anyone. It wasn't anyone on their side of things that violated the deal. You said that Israel is still in Lebanon, contrary to the deal. Well, maybe they need to get the fuck out of there.
So Israel then retaliated by striking a bunch of targets in southern Lebanon. Because
what kind of targets? What kind of targets, Ben? Civilian targets. That's why he doesn't say. I mean, I'm surprised, actually, that he even acknowledged that the targets that the Lebanese resistance has been hitting are all military, and that he acknowledged they were inside Lebanon. That is actually very close to almost honest.
Terrorists attack you, whether you're American or Israeli or anyone. You retaliate.
They were defending themselves, though.
And you kill them, and you kill the people who are behind them. That is obviously what the United States would do if Mexico fired at American troops. Hell.
Well, American troops in Mexico, though? If the U.S. goes into Mexico? Okay, let's try it the other way. Let's say Mexico decides to go into the U.S. They decide they're going to take back a lot of the land that the U.S. nicked off them in the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo. And the U.S. would be okay with that, right? The U.S. would not mind if they just sort of showed up in, Texas and New Mexico and Arizona and Southern California and just started razing people's houses to the ground. The U.S. would be chill there. They wouldn't do anything about that.
President said that that's what we would do if Iran killed American troops in the Middle East. There was the president just a couple of weeks ago.
Well, yes, but again, what was the deal? Could you tell us what the deal was, Ben?
Is that your red line for ending the ceasefire?
If they killed?
U.S. troops.
What does that mean?
That you would restart the war with Iran if they killed U.S. troops.
Well, it would be a good reason. I'll be honest with you. If they killed you.
Well, what was the U.S. troops doing at the time, and why are they still in the region? Part of the deal is that they need to get the hell out of there.
U.S. troops, I think I would do that very quickly.
Okay, so, again, that's the way it works. Well,
what I find interesting there is that he was actually very careful. He avoided really saying that outright. I mean, part of that is he is kind of incoherent a lot of the time, but part of that is he knows, even if dickheads like Ben don't want to acknowledge it, this thing is going very badly for the U.S. and humiliating him personally. So he does not want to just outright say that he would do that, I think.
Based on Israel defending itself against, again, a terror group.
They defending themselves where?
Iran then said they would not show up to Switzerland to negotiate with Vice President Vance.
Yes, because Israel was supposed to leave Lebanon as part of the deal.
On Friday, U.S.-Iran talks were officially postponed. The U.S. blamed logistics issues, which, I mean, come on, this is not about flight arrangements.
No, it's about the fact that the U.S. and Israel are breaching the agreement, and they don't want to admit that, and Ben doesn't either.
Reporting that Iran had delayed thanks to the Israeli action against Hezbollah in Lebanon, according to CNN, quote.
Well, no, because they had walked away from the negotiations because because Israel was not supposed to be in Lebanon in the first place.
Vice President Vance is no longer traveling to Switzerland for U.S.-Iran negotiations today. The talks postponed. Iran has asked for guarantees that hostilities in Lebanon will end before it resumes the talks, a diplomat told CNN.
Hostilities will end. Of course CNN would put it that way. Iran said Israel needs to get the hell out of Lebanon. They don't have any right to be there. Israel's refusing, and the U.S. is not making them. So Why the fuck would Iran be negotiating? The U.S. is not respecting this agreement as it is. What's the point of further negotiations? The U.S. already has negative trust on this, because let's remember how they started this fucking war. They used fake diplomatic negotiations as cover for a sneak attack on a primary school. Why exactly would anyone... I mean, I'm surprised that they ever came to the table, to be honest, because why would you trust that they weren't going to just fucking kill you when you got there?
The Iranians have asked for guarantees that hostilities in Lebanon will end as outlined in the signed agreement, the diplomat said, adding that mediators are currently working to resolve the issue. The source described...
Yes. Yeah, that's something you kind of left out there, Ben.
Talks as now temporarily postponed following Israeli strikes in Lebanon, without saying when mediators expected some sort of resumption. So again,
well, yes, because the question is, when will Israel comply with the agreement and get the fuck out of Lebanon? As long as Israel doesn't do that, and it does not say when they're going to do that, there's no scheduling to be done.
Wanted the U.S. to tie Israel's hands as part of the deal. And Israel,
yes, and the U.S. agreed to that.
As any nation would, declined to have its hands tied against terrorism because, again, no country worth itself in its right mind would stop killing terrorists, targeting its homeland and its soldiers.
Wait, okay. That's such an interesting way of putting it, Ben. Since you're talking, the Israelis that you were talking about were in Lebanon, somebody else's country, killing Lebanese people and destroying their homes and razing their villages to the ground and murdering their children. So you're saying that nobody would put up with that shit? No one with any self-respect. So, but when the Lebanese resistance doesn't put up with that makes them lying terrorists because they're enforcing an agreement you don't like.
America, not Israel, not anyone. So now it's being reported that the U.S. has broken.
Wait, I like how he didn't even mention Lebanon. Like, would Lebanon put up with that? It seems that Lebanon's not putting up with that. I mean, the puppet government in Beirut is, because that's what they're there for. They might as well just be Israel's representatives in Lebanon. But this is part of why they're not all that popular.
Some sort of ceasefire between Hezbollah and Israel. Maybe the talks will be put back on.
Well, yes, the prerequisite for there being further talks is that the first part, that the memorandum of understanding is not immediately breached.
Maybe they won't. The hokey pokey is happening, but herein lies the point. This deal was never a deal. It was always from the very beginning vaporware. See, here's the thing.
Well, yes, it was, because the U.S. was never going to respect it and Israel was never going to respect it.
About deals. When you make a durable deal, it always involves two elements. First, a partner on the other side who's credible in their commitments.
Right? Yeah, and that's what Iran does not have. I mean, Israel is not credible in their commitments. They have never abided by a ceasefire, except when faced with overwhelming force and had their hands tied by the U.S. And the U.S. is absolutely not credible. Is again, the whole way they started this was with fake negotiations.
But this has to be true for any contract. If you sign a contract with anyone, the person on the other side is bound by a wide variety of provisions in any agreement.
So what you're saying is that when people sign agreements, there's a mutual assent to be bound. Mutual assent to be bound, Ben. So that means that the fact that Israel is not leaving Lebanon, that sounds like what you'd call a breach.
To its commitments. It has to be an incentive structure, and of course, you have to be able to trust the person on the other side.
There very clearly is an incentive structure. The incentive structure is that if the U.S. does not want this thing to go on indefinitely, while they try to sew back together the shreds of their dignity and their deterrence in the region, then they need to comply with the agreement. And if they don't comply with the agreement, and if they don't ensure Israel's compliance with the agreement, then they're going to go back to being reminded why they were willing to accept this agreement in the first place.
Will actually keep their commitments. Second, there has to be a meeting of the minds. That is an agreement on the terms. That is basic contract law. If you and I...
Actually, that is not, actually. That used to be basic contract law. The meeting of the minds is way outdated. That isn't the language that's used anymore. That is that is actually quite old doctrine.
I sign a contract that I am going to buy a house at an agreed upon price. and I think the agreed upon price is $10, and you think the agreed upon price is $10 million, we do not have an agreement on terms. We do not have a meeting.
Yeah, that's true. And let's say you buy that house. Let's say that you pay. Let's say you pay up front in cash. Let's say then it turns out that on the move-in day, the seller is still occupying the house, has not signed the papers to transfer title, refuses to do so, and refuses to leave the house and let you take possession. You would cancel that check, wouldn't you? That would not make you a lying terrorist to cancel that check, because the other side isn't living up to their agreement, so why are you going to hand them all this fucking money? Why are you going to live up to yours when you're not getting the thing you bargained for? This is kind of basic. You're right, Ben. This is basic contract law.
Of the minds. We do not have a deal or a contract. Again, both of those things have to be present in order for a deal to be durable. One, a credible partner on the other side of the table will keep their commitments. And two, a meeting of the minds, actual agreement on the terms of the contract.
I mean, the fucking world building he does, the fantasy world he lives in, where it's the U.S. It's the U.S. and Israel that lack a credible partner. I mean, that is just wild to me. That anyone's even talking like this. I mean, this is why the Daily Wire is cratering, because even your right-wing slop consumers know that this is nonsense.
This deal has neither of those elements, and it never did have.
And also Ben Shapiro is just a really boring guy.
Those elements. Iran, lest we forget, is run by terrorist jihadists.
What's the U.S.? The U.S. is run by totally reasonable people, though. I mean, they would never quadruple tap a fucking primary school in a desalination plant and threaten to exterminate the population of an entire country of 90 million people or commit genocide.
And also, there was no agreement on the actual terms.
Yes, but there was. That's what the Memorandum of Understanding was.
Now, again, there's a reason why President Trump signed. He signed very obviously to open the Strait of Hormuz.
Okay, so what you're saying is that Trump never intended to be bound by the agreement he signed. That sounds like he's the one who isn't a credible partner, actually, now that you put it that way.
That was the reason. Oil prices would dive, the economy would go up. Now, the reality, I said before, if we wanted to, quote-unquote, open the strait and leave it in the hands of the Iranians, we could have just walked away. We didn't have to sign a damn thing. We could have made...
Wait.
No commitments, kept the sanctions on, and just walked away.
Oh,
and then
well...
Iran would hold the straits or whatever. But instead...
Wait, you don't think Iran would have done something about that?
We are pretending that the strait is open.
Well, it was, until Israel decided to breach the fucking agreement.
And it's not. It is run by the Iranians. We are keeping our commitments. We stopped the blockade. CENTCOM announced.
Well, one of your commitments was getting Israel the fuck out of Lebanon, though, so...
Yesterday, the U.S. forces lifted the blockade on all maritime traffic entering and exiting Iranian ports and coastal areas, in accordance with the president's direction.
See, again, this is something that the U.S., I mean, talking about we kept our commitments, trying to get credit for this, this was already what... This is just the U.S. complying with the law. And not even entirely, it's just partial compliance with a legal obligation. Because the U.S. had no right to blockade the fucking Strait of Hormuz in the first place.
But the Iranians, well, it turns out that they are just openly saying that they control the strait now.
Well, I mean, they do. It's their territorial waters and Oman's.
It is not open. It is not equally accessible by all parties. They are open.
Well, why would it be equally accessible to parties that are engaged in a war of aggression against them?
Saying that they control the strait in perpetuity. Today.
Because it's their territorial waters again.
The Persian Gulf Authority, which is Iran, said this, quote, with regard to the signing of the Islamabad Memorandum of Understanding and the issuance of directives by the competent authorities, applicants wishing to transit the Strait of Hormuz are hereby informed that within the time frame specified in the Memorandum of Understanding, the transit of vessels that submit their transit requests to the Persian Gulf Waterway Management in compliance with the following points will be processed expeditiously.
Yeah, I mean, this is totally consistent with the MOU. So again, thank you for confirming Iran is living up to their side of it.
First, you have to submit your papers to the Iranians.
Yeah.
And then maybe they will approve them. During the 60-day period, say the Iranians.
I mean, the U.S., of course, would never dream of subjecting foreign vessels, say from Russia or China or Iran or Cuba, to any kind of checks if they want to transit U.S. territorial waters. They can just go through freely. Nobody's going to look at them at all, right?
Will be levied on vessels, and the tariffs for security, safety, and environmental service, as well as the relevant Iranian insurance, shall be borne entirely by the government of the Islamic Republic of Iran. Now, left unmentioned is that beyond the 60 days, that's not true. And here's the
yes, that's the deal. Oh, if the price is right. Hey, Tomas, how you doing?
deal. They can close it now. They can close it at any time.
Yeah,
I mean, hell,
that's the deal, because it's theirs.
Literally put out a broadcast today in the Strait saying that they were going to shut down the Strait. Then later they backed off of it. They said they weren't going to do it. But here is what they broadcast. This is a translation quote. Since Israel's withdrawal from Lebanon and a complete lifting of the naval blockade and the withdrawal of American terrorist forces from the Persian Gulf and the region are among the main conditions of the agreement between Iran.
Yes. Wow. I mean, Ben, if you're going to lie, you should probably actually leave this out, because with everything that he's saying here, that's true. And it completely demolishes his agreement, his argument.
Iran and the United States, the Strait of Hormuz will remain closed until these two conditions are met.
Yeah, because that's right in the deal. They insisted on it for good reason.
Ships are ordered not to approach the Strait of Hormuz for their own safety and health. Any vessel that defies this order will be targeted. So, in other words, Iran still controls the strait. And again,
well, yeah. I mean, again, in accordance with the fucking agreement that the U.S. signed. The MOU also says that. So it sounds like Iran is actually being quite consistent with the agreement, and maybe the U.S. and Israel not so much.
This is a weird move. It is a weird move because...
Why is it a weird move? It's so weird. It's so weird that when the U.S. doesn't live up to their end of a deal, that Iran decides that they're not going to give the U.S. A benefit for free that they don't have to.
Let's just say that Iran keeps its commitment for the next 60 days. Now,
so far, there's no reason not to think that they will.
To toll the straits. And they keep it open. Why in the world would you essentially give them an economic nuclear weapon in perpetuity?
Well, give them... wait, is he saying... The U.S. did try to force the Strait of Hormuz open. Yeah, exactly, Tomas. This is exactly what I'm saying. He's like, why would they give Iran the Strait of Hormuz? Well, they tried to take the Strait of Hormuz from Iran, and it didn't go well. They went to like every single fucking NATO country, all over the place. They even tried to approach Japan, and everybody was like, yeah, we're not gonna fucking sacrifice our sailors so that you can avoid making some sort of a deal with the people you attacked. Nobody wanted to do that, because it would be an absolute disaster for whoever tried to force the opening. Because Iran does not need lots of battleships and fucking aircraft carriers and all that stuff. Like, the entire kind of navy that the NATO powers and the U.S. and all the U.S. vassal states have is what it is for forces like Yemen and Iran is an amazing target. An aircraft carrier, you can't miss that shit. If you know what you're doing, I could probably miss it, because you're probably doing it from a significant distance, and you do have to have some kind of skill, which I do not. But people who know what they're doing couldn't miss that, because it's like a fucking half a mile long. So, yeah, nobody, and they have overwatch over the entire thing. They have fire control over the strait, no matter what they do, because they have the high ground, and it's very narrow. The area in which you can actually bring deep water vessels through it is extremely narrow. So trying to force it open was a non-starter. That is how we ended up in where we are right now, Ben. Like, welcome to... Somebody needed to give Ben the previously ons.
We get one. I know the president is trying to lower the gas prices until after the election. I get it.
Wait, but so if he totes can open up the Strait of Hormuz whenever he wants, why didn't he just do that? Then the gas prices would be way low.
However, If the Iranians don't like President Trump, which they don't.
Nobody does. Like, literally, that is one of the many things that people in Iran have in common with us.
And if the Iranians would like the Democrats to win, which presumably they would, why would they not wait until 1 week before the election and just close the strait again?
Well, because... if the U.S. is actually complying with the deal, and Israel is actually complying with the deal, they're doing really well under that deal, and there's no reason to think that they would continue to enjoy the benefits that they had, the hard-won benefits of that memorandum of understanding in terms of the lifting of the economic blockade, the return of stolen assets, and stuff like that, if they just arbitrarily do this. And the fact that apparently it doesn't sound... I have not seen anything saying that the U.S. decided to refreeze any assets, is a tacit acknowledgement as well that Iran is actually just enforcing this agreement and that the U.S. is in breach.
I mean, they could just do that at literally any time.
Yeah.
So again, I understand why the president signed. I understand the incentive structure here.
I don't think you do.
More important here is why Iran signed. In just 1 second, we'll get into the question of why Iran signed.
Well, okay, so Iran signed. This is actually not hard, because Iran is the one who benefits from this fucking deal. Iran gets an end to U.S. aggression, the removal of U.S. forces from the region, especially the ones encircling Iran, gets the money that the U.S. stole back, gets all of the economic blockade lifted, and gets Lebanon freed from Israeli occupation. That's why they're signing it. It's a pretty good deal for them. It's not hard to understand why people sign something that's a good deal for them. What you really need to spend a little bit of time on, actually, is why the U.S. signed what is, on paper, a really bad deal for them.
This deal. There's one pretty good, smart reason why they did.
Oh, well, because everything about the deal favors them. Hope that helps.
Quick question. If I asked you right now, what keeps you up at night about your business, what would you...
That the economy is in free fall and everything's a fucking grift. Yeah, exactly. I mean, Iran, I did a video about this because I was talking about this 2 years ago. They have, despite constant provocations and threats, very much been a force for de-escalation. I mean, their doctrine is one of strategic patience. When they are not looking to start a fight that they can't finish, and they want to make sure that if they end up in a fight, it's one where they have no trouble justifying their participation in it. And they also... despite the fact that the US and Israel attacked Iran several times before this, which somehow Ben forgot. Ben forgot to mention that. Ben, you need to take better notes, because that's a thing to mention. The US did attack Iran in the first place, twice. You know, they actually had very limited responses in the 12-Day War, and before that, when Israel and the US did a terrorist attack in the middle of Tehran to kill Ismail Haniyeh, the chief Palestinian negotiator in the ceasefire talks that were ongoing at the time. Yeah, I mean, Iran is not looking for a fight. They were given one. And having been given one, they did pretty well, because the U.S., it turns out, is only really tough because nobody cashes the checks they keep writing. Pure talk, Shapiro. Good.
Why did Iran sign? Well, I mean, they get a few things, aside from the fact that the MOU...
yeah, they do get a few things. Like a removal of U.S. bases. Okay, let's hear what he says.
It actually guarantees them some obvious immediate benefits, including that America will stop attacking them, and that we will remove the blockade and allow them to ship their oil sanctions free. There's something bigger that's going on here.
Okay, but there are more benefits than that, though. You left out a few, because the U.S. returns the stolen assets, removes their bases.
The goal of the Iranian government was to get America to sign on the dotted line. That is a major win for them. Why? Well, because...
Well, because it's a good deal for them, and it's the U.S. being forced militarily to make concessions.
Because they are master negotiators, and they know one thing. Everyone who signs an international deal, at least in democracies, has what's called sunk cost fallacy. Sunk cost fallacy.
Okay. I think he's about to tell us he doesn't know what a sunk cost fallacy is.
Is something that afflicts all human beings, and you have to fight your way through it.
Wait, you just said it was only a thing in so-called democracies.
Sunk cost fallacy is the idea. Let's say you buy a fixer of a house, and you dump $100,000 into fixing the house, and you know it's going to cost you another $300,000, and then it's a money loser. You're only going to be able to sell the house for $200,000. Many people will go ahead and continue to sink the money into the house because they'll say, "Hey, I already spent 100. I may as well spend 300 more."
Okay, yeah, but why is this only something that people have in democracies and the U.S. and Israel?
To get to the completion of the project. That's sunk cost fallacy. You've already put yourself out there for a thing, so you may as well, quote-unquote, go all the way.
Yeah, I mean, and what's interesting, it's interesting that he brings this up, because this is actually the main difference between, and the most exploitable, I should just keep on saying, difference between Trump and normal U.S. politicians. Because normal U.S. politicians are big into that. That's why the U.S. occupied Afghanistan for 20 fucking years. That's why the U.S. is still occupying Iraq today. Just very low-key, so you don't hear so much about it. Trump likes to cut his losses quickly. He wants a very quick win, something that he can just be, just pure arrogance from start to finish, and he can just strut around like a prick. And if that's not what he's getting, if in fact he is getting embarrassed because there's a huge amount of pushback and it isn't going his way, then he wants to cut his losses and get the fuck out and go and attack somebody else. And that is easily the best thing about him, because it means that there's a chance to basically stop anything that he does just by making it cost too much for him, just by turning the temperature up too high, so that the whole thing becomes really embarrassing and it just starts putting a spotlight on how actually he's weak as fuck. Then, then he will pull out. Then he will back off and just quietly come up with something else to do.
In other words, once you say and feel that you like a thing, people feel a necessity to keep defending the thing. So, this means...
that's the thing. Trump is never... the only thing Trump is that committed to is himself and his personal image. His personal tough guy image amongst the biggest dickheads on the planet. People who will happily forget every other thing that he does if he pulls off one thing that can kind of look like a win. The kind of people who will listen to Ben Shapiro and actually think that he is a very clever boy.
Ron wanted to get America's name on the paper, in the belief that America will keep defending the crappy deal no matter what.
Well, okay, that sounds a little bit like what you're saying is the U.S., they expected the U.S. to live up to their end of the bargain. That's what that means when you defend the deal no matter what after you sign it. That means that you're living up to your end of it. So that kind of sounds like it's the opposite of what Ben was saying at the beginning. Because at the beginning he was saying, how could anyone think that Iran was ever going to live up to the deal? And now he's saying, Iran probably assumed the U.S. was going to live up to this fucking deal, and ha ha ha.
Which again would mean inherently, as we said before, defending the terms of the deal and also Iran as a credible negotiating partner.
Well, now, yes, because when you sign a deal... That's, part of it is that you live up to its terms, Ben. Wait, you were just talking about meetings of the minds and Pacta Sunt Servanda and all that first-year contract law bullshit. All this, half-remembered 1L shit that he was talking about there. He seems to have forgotten that. How is this not just a complete flip? A complete contradiction of what he just said 10 minutes ago.
Is run by thug terrorists who have murdered thousands of Americans and, in the last few months alone, tens of thousands of Iranians.
Yeah, he's going to continue to do that. How many... Okay, since he cares so much, because Ben cares about Iranians' lives. He really cares about them. So, how many Iranians has the U.S. murdered since they started this war by a sneak attack on a primary school? Ben, like the actual number, not the bullshit number you keep on making up. Like, I mean, I've heard the number that of Iranians that Iran supposedly killed during these protests, according to Israeli and U.S. government sources, though we're the only people putting it in the 5 figures. Keeps going up. I mean, now I've heard like propagandists from the U.S. government in Israel saying it's 80,000. A few months ago, it was still like 20,000 or something like that. They just keep on increasing it. And it seems like somebody pointed this out recently. Was it on Electronic Intifada? Possibly. That it seems like what they're trying to do is match the official number of identified Palestinians murdered by the U.S. and Israel in Gaza in order to downplay that.
They lie like they breathe. Obviously. They violated every deal they have ever signed.
Like what? For example...
They're not trustworthy. They're terror supporters. But now...
like, the U.S. removed Syria from the list of countries supporting terrorism when a guy from ISIS and Al-Qaeda self-appointed himself president of the country. But the U.S. does not support terrorism.
Obviously have a stake in pretending that they are credible. Now, here's the thing. They're openly dunking on us. They know this. We're pretending that they're reasonable and rational partners on the other side of the table, and they're just dunking on us.
Well, yeah, they're dunking on you militarily, though, Ben. Yeah, exactly. Well, I'm not going to say every, because I think that they are technically in compliance with their treaty with Egypt. Because Egypt, since Sadat, is very much just as much of a U.S. puppet state as Israel. So they are allies. They pretend otherwise, especially like Egypt and Saudi, just like all the Arab dictatorships in the region, the U.S.-backed ones, all pretend to criticize Israel, all pretend to be totes on the side of the Palestinians, but quietly they're all working with Israel. Like, the ones that aren't are the ones that are very openly not working with Israel because they've actually been involved in military action against Israel.
So, for example, senior IRGC officer Mohsen Rezaei said, quote, "The proud and triumphant nation of Iran brought the devils of the world to their knees and shattered their dominance."
Yeah, that sounds about right. Hey, old Al Hooten, we're watching Ben Shapiro explain how it's wrong for Iran to enforce the terms of the agreement, and that Iran was also actually really silly to think that the U.S. would live up to the terms of the agreement.
This epic will endure eternally in history. We mourn over the blood of our martyred leader, and there is no balm for this wound save vengeance. United as one behind the supreme leader of the revolution, we await the fulfillment of the conditions.
Yeah, that is the conditions that the U.S. signed up to. They await the U.S. living up to their end of the deal.
Meanwhile, the guy whose name is on the other side of the agreement, Mohammed Ghalibaf.
Not Ghalibaf, Ghalibaf.
Who again is the leader of the Iranian parliament and a murderer, says, quote, "We are..."
Oh, wait, and a murderer. He just kind of says that as if it requires no further. Who did he murder? Who did Ghalibaf personally murder?
At your command. The task assigned by us to the Supreme
Leader. Yeah, he actually made the no rational person would think we're serious argument. He actually made that just a few minutes ago.
Conditions and clauses of the agreement. In the event of bad faith breach of contract and excessive demands by the opposing side, we have no hesitation in delivering a crushing response to the enemy.
Yeah, this is them, Ben. This is them actually reminding everybody that they kind of kicked your ass.
They were once slapped during the war. If they wish to tread that path again, they'll receive an even harder slap.
Yeah, and the thing is, Iran actually lives up to that. Iran has been very consistent. They don't do things. They actually say in advance what they're likely to do, and then and then they do it. Every single step of this, they have actually said, they've given warnings. They've said, don't do that, because if you do that, we're going to do this. And either the US and Israel don't do that, in which case they don't do this, or they do that, in which case Iran does exactly what they said they were going to do. They play with, they negotiate with open cards, really. It's very clear. They're very clear and upfront with what they're trying to get and how they're going to go about doing it. It is so. This is why it is absolutely wild to be like, oh, you can't possibly trust them. They're wildly terrorists and stuff. Yeah, exactly. In international negotiations, they have very clearly, and they're not the only ones who have taken the strategy of just being extremely principled negotiators whose word is actually, whose word can be taken to the bank, because they know, for one thing, they have to deal with the fact that they have a really bad reputation because there's been this massive smear campaign against them ever since they overthrew the U.S. puppet regime in '79. So they have to. It just makes sense, and and they really are not in a position to bullshit around, because if they bluff, it's over. If they say something they can't, if they make a threat they can't deliver on, then nobody will take them seriously again, and that could be extremely costly for them in their position, because they are fundamentally in the weaker position. Technologically, if the U.S. wanted to just abandon all the other things the U.S. military is doing in other countries and just focus entirely on destroying Iran, they could do that. They probably won't do that, because all sorts of other stuff would end up out of control, and but theoretically that is not impossible just because of the kind of weapons the U.S. has. So they want to do things in a way that obviates that.
So again, does that sound like a wonderful, awesome partner? Is that what that sounds like to you?
Oh, well, wait, okay, so the idea is that now we're fucking supposed to be buddies? Iran's a wonderful, awesome partner. Well, of course, they're not going to be you're not a wonderful, awesome partner. You started a fucking war and killed thousands of them and destroyed critical civilian infrastructure and little kids. Why the fuck? They don't want you to be a fucking partner. They don't want to be your partner. They want to get you the fuck out of the region, and that's kind of what the U.S. agreed to.
Meanwhile, the United States is out there talking about how wonderful and rational these people are. President Trump, yesterday at the G7?
Yeah, because they are. And what else are they going to say?
The Iranians are great.
We're dealing with people that I think are very rational people.
Yeah, this is the salutary effect of military defeat.
Were nice to deal with. They were strong people, smart people. I think actually they're smarter than the first and second group. But they're not radicalized, and they're, looking to help their country.
And then, of course, J.D. Vance, the Vice President of the United States, who's on CBN News, David Brody, and he
got CBN News.
Suggested that he was not uncomfortable in any way standing alongside Mohammed Khalifah, a mass murderer.
Well, wait, okay. So that's the second time he has specifically said that the head of the Iranian parliament personally is a mass murderer. Can you give an example of, are we attributing every single person the Iranian government has ever killed personally to Khalibaf? Why you keep saying that? But even let's assume we take it that way. That he's responsible for everyone that the Iranian government killed, because he probably has ever killed, at least on his watch, because he probably signed off on I can see that. But then we have a problem, because how J.D. Vance is a much bigger mass murderer.
how uncomfortable is that going to be for you? I mean, obviously, you don't support the actions of what he did, but you're going to be standing next to him.
You know, it's not uncomfortable. I think what the president would say, and I certainly agree, is that you deal with all kinds of people in international relations. Sometimes you deal with very nice people. Sometimes you deal with very not nice people.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes you have to deal with a fucking white supremacist who fucks furniture.
Make the region safer, but most importantly, get what we need for the American people.
Okay, so, again, the Iranians understand that if they are treated as a credible partner, they can play us for fools. If
wait, they can play... What do you mean? So, playing the U.S. for fools is expecting the U.S. to live up to the deal they signed. That's the U.S. being played for fools.
We are more invested in the deal than they are. They could...
Well, why would the U.S. is only more invested... I don't even think that's true. They get way more out of this deal than the U.S. does. The U.S... What the U.S. gets is an end to an embarrassing military disaster. At least provisionally. Iran gets a lot more out of it. So, I mean, they're very clearly more invested in the deal than the U.S. because they're the ones enforcing it. If the U.S. were as invested in the deal as Iran, Israel would be out of Lebanon by now.
And pretend that terms that we negotiated mean what they want them to mean, not what we say that they mean. And that
Wait, okay. So it's either... Wait a second. So the idea is it's either what they want them to mean or what the U.S. says they mean. Wouldn't it be wild, chat, if maybe the terms were written down someplace and we could all look at it? Like, maybe we could just look at what the agreement says and then we could see what the terms are. This isn't an oral agreement. This isn't fucking he said.
We'll continue to defend Iran and their, quote-unquote, reasonable interpretations. That's the whole game. And that brings...
I mean, I wouldn't even call what they're doing interpretations. They're just insisting on the plain language of the fucking agreement.
Us back to Lebanon and what's been going on over the course of the last 48 hours. So, if you recall, the MOU, which we've gone through in detail, literally point one...
Well, you skipped over some parts, but you quoted some people from Iran who pointed out the bits that you skipped, which kind of meant that you lied for no good reason.
Of the deal reads, quote, the United States of America and the Islamic Republic of Iran and their allies in the current war declare upon signing this memorandum of understanding an immediate and permanent cessation of military activity on all fronts, including in Lebanon.
Yes, that is exactly what it says. Wow, it turns out Ben does know that there's a written agreement, that we don't have to just rely on what one side says or the other side says. So, okay, so did Israel cease hostilities? Did they leave Lebanon?
Undertake not to initiate further war or any military action against each other, to refrain from the threat or use of force against each other, and to ensure the territorial integrity and sovereignty of Lebanon.
Yes, the territorial integrity and sovereignty of Lebanon. Now, okay, those are important words, Ben.
Now, that provision can be read in two separate ways.
They're two separate ways, chat. I can't wait to hear how he manages to explain that ceasing all hostilities and respecting the territorial integrity and sovereignty of Lebanon is not inconsistent with Israel continuing to bomb Lebanon and occupy Lebanese territory.
I say a meeting of the minds requires both sides to read the provision the same way.
No, see, this is again, like, he actually did, he's a lawyer, he actually did have contract law. He knows perfectly well a meeting of the minds is way outdated. Because there is the plain language of the fucking agreement. You can actually look at it and say, this is, so the fact that one side subsequently says, oh, you know, I interpret this to mean the exact opposite of what it means. So there's no meaning of the mind, so there's no agreement. That's not how that works, Ben.
This is why lawyers usually negotiate out agreements like this, so that there's no lack of clarity.
Well, yeah, I mean, then there's no lack of clarity here. It is very clear. Cease military operations. Respect Lebanon's territorial integrity and sovereignty.
The whole purpose, however, of this agreement was to prevent clarity. So,
well, if that's the purpose, they didn't do a very good job because that language is extremely clear.
So, the United States said from the outset that this term did not stop Israel from defending itself from Hezbollah because, again, the provision said...
no, actually...
There would be an immediate and permanent cessation of military activity on all fronts, including in Lebanon. Lebanon is a state. Hezbollah is not the state of Lebanon.
Yeah, well, yes, but okay, Lebanon is okay.
Therefore, in the American read, this does not prevent anti-terror action in Lebanon. It prevents action.
Well, okay. But here's the thing, though. There are these words, territorial integrity and sovereignty. And the reason they're in there is because Israel is violating both of those things by being present on Lebanese territory without anyone's consent.
Against the Lebanese government. In Iran's read, this is supposed to prevent Israel from defending itself from Hezbollah.
Yeah, defending itself. Israel would not be the IDF would not be defending themselves on Lebanese territory if they complied with the agreement and got the fuck off of Lebanese territory. Hence, territorial integrity and sovereignty.
And now, we would be a little crazy to try to stop Israel from protecting itself from Hezbollah. Again.
Well, they would be safe. They would be safe from Hezbollah, who also have a much better record of abiding by ceasefires than Israel. It's not hard. If they got the fuck out of Lebanon and stopped bombing the place.
Hezbollah is not only a terrorist group, it is a terrorist group responsible for the murder of hundreds of Americans.
I mean, he keeps saying that. It's still bullshit.
They killed 241 Marines in Beirut in 1983. They killed another 19 U.S. airmen in Saudi in 1996 in the Khobar Towers bombing.
Actually, did they ever claim that? Because I don't think that was them. Like, literally. Okay, no, a different group. That's what he did. This is, okay, what he did there is there's another group by the name Hezbollah al-Hijaz. That is a Saudi Shia group. And they carried out an attack on the Khobar Towers. That is not the same organization as Hezbollah in Lebanon. Those are different organizations. They're organizationally separate. There are a number of organizations with that in the name. In Iraq, one of the resistance groups is called Kataib Hezbollah. They're not organizationally part of the same thing. What they have in common is that they are Shia, and that they also share a hostility to U.S. and Israeli occupation of the region.
Responsible for the collapse of the Lebanese state and continuous terror attacks on
what Lebanese state?
Israel for decades at this point. Literally every single day.
Wait. What did you just say?
To try to stop Israel from protecting itself from Hezbollah. Again, Hezbollah is not only a terrorist group, it is a terrorist group responsible for the murder of hundreds of Americans. They killed 241 Marines in Beirut in 1983. They killed another 19 U.S. airmen in Saudi in 1996 in the Khobar Towers bombing. They've been responsible for the collapse of the Lebanese state and continuous terror attacks on northern Israel for decades at this.
No, not continuous and not for decades. And also, that's not northern Israel, that is fucking Lebanon. See, what he's talking about is the fact that Israel occupied Lebanon for decades. From the 1980s till the early 2000s. And it was Hezbollah that kicked Israel out. And then Israel tried to reinvade in 2006, and they got their asses kicked out of Lebanon again. Every time that Israel tries to invade... in fact, I mean, Hezbollah was created in response to Israel repeatedly invading Lebanon. That's why they're there. They're there to defend Lebanon against Israel, because the completely dysfunctional government that Lebanon inherited from the colonial period and is controlled by the United States literally will not defend the territory against the one hostile force that they have to deal with, which is Israel. Like, literally, the so-called Lebanese army has to sign an agreement when they get their weapons from the U.S. that they will not use them at any time under any circumstance against Israel, knowing that Israel is the only country that invades them.
Like, literally every single day.
That, I mean, what he just said is a fucking lie.
Iran says, literally, point one of the agreement, point one, the first point, is that we, the United States, must stop Israel from defending itself.
Now, no. That's when you're in somebody else's country and the people in that country try to kick you out, you're not defending yourself. But what do you make of the territorial integrity and sovereignty of Lebanon? Do you think that that's consistent with a foreign military occupation, do you?
Which is kind of a big gap, right? And it's a big gap. And
yeah, I mean, I wonder. So, one party says that the agreement to stop military operations requires you to stop military operations, and that respecting the territorial integrity and sovereignty of a country means respecting their territorial integrity and sovereignty. And the other country says, well, no, it doesn't. It means we get to do whatever the fuck we want. Gee, I wonder, this is one of those really nettlesome things. Like, it would be so nice to have an authoritative source, like a written document we could look at to see if there's anything in there that says that Israel is allowed to just continue attacking Lebanon. Oh, that's right, there is, and it says that they're not.
Everybody just glossed over it to get you a deal.
Oh, well, no, they didn't gloss over shit. You're glossing over territorial integrity and sovereignty.
So what does that mean? It means the U.S., in an attempt to make it work, is now basically kind of trying to play it both ways. Well,
no, they're not trying to make it work. If they were trying to make it work, they would tell Israel that they need to stop. Not just publicly, for the folks at home, and to try to mollify Iran without doing anything. They would have to actually tell Israel that either they get the fuck out of Lebanon, or they're not going to get any more weapons. As long as the U.S. doesn't do that, Israel is not going to do, and is not going to leave. And of course the U.S., see, what he's saying, that the one, like, accidental, minimal sort of turd of truth that is in this, in what he's saying, is that the U.S. would really like to see if Iran is serious about enforcing that part. They want to see just how committed Iran is to defending the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Lebanon. And so it is convenient in that sense to be like, oh, we did kind of say Israel was supposed to cut it out. That's another thing he's leaving out, because Vance and Trump both publicly, that is their public position, that Israel needs to stop. That does not seem to be their private position, but it is their public position. And then Israel refuses, and then they can say, oh, what can we do? And they want to see if that is enough for Iran to walk away. And Iran is making it clear that it is enough for them to walk away. They are insisting on the letter of the agreement.
Say, sure, Israel has the right to defend itself, but not too hard.
So, Israel has the right to defend itself in Lebanon. Yeah, I mean, and remember, Germany actually did put it that way. They went to great lengths in order to create a fake Polish attack on a German radio transmitter station in Gleiwitz, just in order to claim that they had been sneak attacked by Poland.
Because then the Iranians might get mad.
Okay, and with that, it is time to wrap up for tonight. Thank you to everyone who joined in. I hope you enjoyed the stream. I will be back tomorrow at 11:30 p.m. U.S. Eastern Time, and I look forward to seeing you then. I have a whole bunch of other stuff that I found, but that one just ended up really... It's really captivating watching him squirm his way through that agreement and try to find a way where it does not say what it obviously says. And you can see why he doesn't practice law, because he's not good at this. Have a